Thank you very much. Thank you. What I need you to do is go recite all that in front of my husband, please. He needs to hear somebody talk about me like that. No. Listen, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and your very warm welcome. And thank you for, coming out tonight, like Pete said, spending your Thursday night here with us. And I just want to ask before I get started, this is always emotional for me. I'm sorry, they can tell you I cry every time I do it. But could I ask everybody who's a veteran to please stand? And can we give them a hand? And while you remain standing, if you're a family member of a veteran, please stand. Along with them. Family members of veterans also stand. Look at this. This is a room full of my kind of people. Thank you. I want to tell you, veterans and families of veterans, because, that's, of course, all I was. I never served my country in the military. But I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. There is not a group of people in this entire world that I would rather spend my time with than you, because you're the people, and not just spend my time with, I don't even know how to say this sincerely enough, to give my honor, respect, loyalty, and love to than the veterans of the United States of America. Because of you, I was able to raise my family in freedom, to teach my son the principles of America, the greatest land on earth. And you also enabled him to fulfill every dream he ever had. And I like to say that Aaron, lived 90 years and 30, and he did, because he lived large. And you know why? Because you paved the way. You made that happen, and I just want to thank you. Even though this free nation that we live in offers us the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, our founders always knew that those rights were not something that could be guaranteed. They always knew that, like Ronald Reagan told us, and Pete started that quote, that they would always have to be fought for and defended, that we wouldn't pass them to the next generation through a genetic pull, and that if we didn't do these things, that one day we'd watch our children and our children's children, and we'd tell them what it was once like to live in America where men were free. They knew that. And not too long ago, it dawned on me that our founders, the men and women and families and children who started this great nation, who had the courage to see something in a vision that they had never lived, had never known, the dream of freedom, they sacrificed everything to get it, but they never lived to really experience it. And yet only 239 years has passed till this nation has tossed out more liberties, more freedoms than we could ever track down and remember that we've lost, because they're so far gone. We've thrown them out. We've thrown them out like yesterday's trash, forgetting what it cost to gain them and to keep them. And I think that a lot of people in this nation don't even really think about a liberty being removed unless it hits them personally. And so I think that's why we as a majority stay silent on so many things that are being stripped from us, so many rights. Sean, I wish you still had your t-shirt on, because what did it say?
Free men do not ask permission to bear arms.
Did you hear that? Free men do not ask permission to bear arms. That's why we're free. But I know, looking in this room, and I know by the fact that you're here, that you're not that breed of people who's going to sit idly on your couch and watch America go to hell in a handbasket. We are not going to stand by and do that. I know you're here because most of you in this room, it looked like the majority of this room was full of either veterans or veterans' families, and you are the kind of people who understood the price of freedom and understood that someone had to pay it, and like Pete said, if not us, who? And if not now, when? You're those people. I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight, and I want to remind us, just have a little history lesson here, that that over 41 million Americans have served this nation during times of war. 41 million. Over 1.3 million of those drew their last breath on a battlefield, defending what we call America. And you know, I think, when I think about Aaron and what he would want in return for that, I know who he was. I know what he would want. And so I think I can speak for most of you who fought. All you'd really require is that people came behind you and did the same, right? That's all you want, is for the next generation to continue that noble valor of protecting and defending America. Because if we don't, if it ever quits, we've lost everything we gained, haven't we? And it's over. This great experiment of freedom is over. Our son, you know, like you were told, he was a Navy SEAL. And you know, one thing that I you know, not to correct you because you asked me and I said, yeah, that's because I'm old and I can't hear anymore. But he actually obliterated the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament in his left knee, and tore all the others. He had it replaced, rehabbed it. I'm going to make this brief. And started progressing toward his dream that he'd had since he was 8 years old of being a Navy SEAL. He thought he could do it again. This was in his senior year of high school. And just before school got out that year, he was playing a pickup game of basketball with some friends, and he blew that knee out again. Obliterated the ACL again and all the other ligaments in the knee. The surgeon went in this time, and Aaron, you know, had every expectation of rehabbing like he had the prior time. Except the surgeon came out and he had horrific news. He said there was nothing we could do. There wasn't enough of his knee left to replace it. I can't fix it. And basically, Aaron is going to spend the rest of his life somewhat handicapped. And he'll never be able to do anything athletic again without the use of a special brace, because he basically has no joint in the knee. But I have to back up and tell you something really important here. And I say it every time because it's the most important thing you can ever know about Aaron and about our family. Aaron gave his life to Christ at a really young age. It's hugely important for two reasons. One, I know where he is today. I know that Christ scooped him up on August 6th before his body ever hit that ground and took him to heaven. And I know I'll be with him again one day. But the second thing is it gave Aaron a discernment that was uncharacteristic of young boys. And what I mean by that is he was always that kid who was able to tell right from wrong, and not just tell it from right from wrong. He couldn't do wrong without it bothering. Now, I'm not saying he didn't drink or do, you know, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the difference between good and evil. Evil was offensive to Aaron. It was always offensive to Aaron. He lived his whole life with that mantra, and that's why I say by the time he was 8 years old, he'd tell anyone who cared to listen that one day he was going to be a Navy SEAL. So when he had the knee injury, that dream was over, right? It was completely over. And Aaron resigned his life to not living up to what he'd always thought he'd been created to be. And then came the day that changed everybody's history in this room, September 11th, 2001. And on the day those towers fell, some rage started burning in my son's soul. And he couldn't take it. And a few months later, he came home on his 21st birthday, and he sat down at the table with his father and I after work, and he said, listen, I got to tell you something. I stopped by the Navy recruiter's office today on the way home from work, and I joined the SEAL Challenge program. And the first thing his dad said was, son, you'll never make it. And I said, did you tell him about your knee? And he said, well, of course not, or they wouldn't have let me join. So I'm like, okay, this is really good. Make a long story short, Aaron said that day that he believed that God had created him to be a SEAL. He'd always known it his whole life, and that if that was true, that he would be able to make it with or without a left knee. Long story short, 157 men started Bud's Class 248, and 7 finished, and Aaron was one of them. I couldn't believe it. I I had a real mixed emotion there, you know, as a mom, because in the back of my mind I was thinking, please, God, please don't let him become, you know, but at the same time wanting him to achieve his dreams, I wanted him to be able to. Not only did Aaron, you know, not only did he graduate Bud's class, but his name is on a wall in Coronado Island, California, and it's titled First Time Every Time. Aaron was one of the few men in history who completed every single evolution required of them the first time they tried it. And I don't say that to brag on Aaron, because he would literally reach right down and smack me in the head if he ever thought I was out bragging on him. You know how people like that are, noble people. I say it to brag on God, because there's absolutely no reason that Aaron was able to do what he did. And not only that, the biggest thing that means to me is that I knew, and his father knew, that Aaron was exactly where he was supposed to be on August 6th, 2011. No mistakes had been made. You know, Aaron never saw himself as a hero. Like I said, he was the most humble human being you would ever meet. And, you know, funny, laughed all the time, larger than life. That's the big hole in our family, is just his presence. He was a huge presence. But I want to tell you something. Aaron Vaughn never took for granted one day of his life that he'd been blessed enough to have been born in the United States of America, where men are free. He never took it for granted. And we wouldn't have let him if he tried. And I always say to people, please don't feel sorry for me. My son lived a huge life, and he did exactly what he was created to do. Before Aaron's death, I was your average American citizen. I was very concerned about things, followed the news, you know. The Fox News emblem, by the way, Pete, I don't know if I've ever told you this, the Fox News emblem was actually burned into the screen of one of our televisions. That's actually why they had to start rotating it, because it was burning people's screens out. So I always followed the news, and I was concerned. But after Aaron's death, I got concerned enough to get up off my fat butt and do something about it, to take my place in history, in American history, to do my part in fighting culturally what my son and all of you in this room fought kinetically. I knew it was time for me to make a difference. I knew that Aaron's life meant too much to let it be wasted in vain, and to not carry on the obligations that he'd been created to fulfill, that I know were fostered in our home. You know, many questions, as Lee said, many questions surrounded the shoot down of Extortion 17, where 30 Americans died. The single largest loss of life in Naval Special Warfare history, the single largest one-day loss of life in the now 12 and a half years of war. And, you know, a lot of questions surrounded it. And my husband and I, just to briefly touch on that, we started asking a couple simple questions. And unfortunately, what we got were varied answers, never the same answer twice, which made us ask more questions. And I don't know if the truth will ever actually come out about exactly what went wrong that night, but one thing we have absolutely narrowed it down to is that it shouldn't have happened, and that's okay. I'm not angry. I'm angry about that, of course, but what I'm saying is I'm using this in a productive way. What we've got to do is we've got to talk to America about what's happening to our warfighters right now in Afghanistan. We've got to talk about the rules of engagement. We adopted the COIN strategy in 2009. In the first 7.5 years of war on terror, we lost 630 U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. In the next 3.5 years, we lost 1,544. In the first 7.5 years of war in Afghanistan, we had 2,638 U.S. soldiers come home wounded, maimed, forever changed. In the next 3.5 years, 15,036. And no one's talking about this, so we are. Like they said, we've become advocates for our military, for our boots on the ground. We're telling the truth about what's happening to these soldiers that are largely being forgotten. And by the way, you know, right now in this 12.5-year conflict, we've lost 6,808 U.S. Americans. We've lost 6,808 Americans. And I don't even know, the records are only good through 2012 of the wounded in action. So we got to start talking about these things. But last October, I got to wrap this up, last October I found Concerned Veterans for America. It was the first organization of any type that I felt compelled to latch myself to. I was so honored to be asked to be a part of it, because what Concerned Veterans for America is, like Pete said, and I won't reiterate it all, we're about action. Everywhere I go and talk about the rules of engagement, people look at me, or about all the issues we're concerned about, the VA, the health, healthcare, all these things we're concerned about. Everybody says, but what can we do? And I really don't, nobody knows what to do. But look, Concerned Veterans is putting teams of brilliant minds together, and they're figuring out what to do, and they're letting us be a part of it. And I can't tell you how honored I am to be a part of it, because I'll tell you something. It's like Pete said, we all know something has gone terribly wrong in this country. We all know. We can't even list the things that have gone wrong because there's so many. But I'm going to tell you something. I cannot let it be said of me that when it all started falling apart, I did nothing. I can't look at my 5 grandchildren one day and them say to me, Grandma, where were you when it all went wrong? I have to fight. And so Concerned Veterans for America allows me to get in the fight, allows me a position to do that, and it will allow each one of you in this room to have a position to fight for this nation. And I know you're the kind of people who fought. That's who you are. It's in your blood. Ronald Reagan said, and you'll notice that I quote Ronald Reagan a lot. I just want to say that my son's his only son's name is Reagan. Ronald Reagan said, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We can preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we can sentence this generation of young people to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we are destined to fail, if this way of ours is to be lost, then at least let our children and our children's children say of us that it didn't fail because we failed to try. Dietrich Bonhoeffer also said, the ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves its children. So again, I want my 5 grandchildren to have the same kind of world I got to raise my family in. I want them to have the privileges that you provided my family, those of you who fought in earlier wars. I want them to have the privileges of what my son fought and died for. And I'm going to tell you what, I talk a lot about what Aaron did want and what he did fight and die for, but I want to spend the last minute here talking about what he did not die for. Aaron did not die so that big governments and bloated bureaucracies could destroy small businessmen and women. That's right. With endless red tape, burdensome, unnecessary regulations, and punitive taxation. He didn't die so that America could sell its soul to other countries, mounting unspeakable amount of debt. He didn't die so the Bureau of Land Management could draw arms on a U.S. citizen. That's right. He didn't die so that he could watch his country become enslaved to poverty, and he sure didn't put his life on the line night after night after night after pitch black night to catch vile terrorists who mean nothing but harm to this country, only to watch a commander-in-chief turn them loose. Thank you. I'm betting that's not what you fought for either. I'm betting it's not. You fought for freedom. I know you because I know my son. I know your heart. You fought because you knew in your gut that a representative republic was the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. And it must be protected. That's why I'm here. I'm asking you to lock arms with me, go out to that action center, become a part of Concerned Veterans for America, join this cause. You can make a difference. Thank you.